Вітаю, колеги.
Greetings, dear colleagues. My name is Alena Lunyova. I am the lawyer of the Center of Moderator Advocacy Director of the ZMINA Center for Human Rights, and today we're going to talk about the role of Belarus in the issues of indoctrination and militarization of Ukrainian children. And today we are going to have Onysia Syniuk, legal analyst of the ZMINA Center for Human Rights, Katerina Rashevska, lawyer of the Regional Center for Human Rights, and Yury Yukevich, program director of Freedom House Ukraine. To be honest, the question of the deportation of Ukrainian children to the territory of including the territory of Belarus was studied by many organizations. Nevertheless, in the research we were conducted, we paid more attention to what is happening to Ukrainian children after they are in the Republic of Belarus, because the fact that they are there are no doubts about that, and we knew about that for a long time. And at the moment, it is important to understand what actually Ukrainian children get, how they are educated, and what kind of education and information they get. And therefore, I would like to ask Ms. Onysia Syniuk, what are the results of her results, and how does the Republic of Belarus, so to say, help Ukrainian children when bringing them to their territories? Greetings, everyone who is in the audience and who are watching us online. Our research started with in 2021, when Alexander Lukashenko signed the order on moving one group of children to the territory of Belarus. So that was our baseline. And we ended in our research in June 2024. When I'm saying that we managed to identify 2,219 children who were moved to the territory of the Republic of Belarus, we are talking about these 2 years. In fact, these actions are being continued, and therefore these numbers are not the final ones. In our research, we focused not on the fact that the children are being moved, but on the fact what is happening to the children after these children are on the territory of the Republic of Belarus. And in this case, even though these movements are reasoned by recreation purposes or the other purposes, but the children for some reason are moving not during summer, but for some when the recreation happens, but in fact it happens during the educational year. It's done because they want these children to join educational program, historical, cultural meetings with the politicians and so on, which could be on vacation during the summer. These children are studied according to the educational program of the Republic of Belarus. In the Republic of Belarus, there is no Belarusian language. Instead, they have Russian language. So Ukrainian children are educated in Russian language, and according to the Belarus program, which is repeating the narratives of the Russian Federation. And for example, the Second World War, when they are naming the Nazis, and the Nazis are Ukrainian, Lithuanians, Latvians, and Estonians, all neighborhood. And in fact, the children have very intensive program. They have meetings with politicians, with cultural activists, who completely repeat all the Russian narratives. They are told that they are Russians. They are told that the territories they came from are the Russian territories and not the occupied territories of Ukraine. And they identified only as the children of the Russian Federation. And the children themselves are used for the propaganda purposes on the national TV of the Republic of Belarus. So they are repeatedly traumatized when they are asked a direct question: how much you were scared when you were under shelling? So how your relatives were wounded? And of course, it traumatizes children, and they're crying. And all of these things are broadcasted without any concerns about the best interest of the children. Moreover, in one of the Kansas interviewer who was interviewing Ukrainian boy, she asked whether he is ready to fight for his motherland when the time comes. And unfortunately, the child answered yes. And here we come to the next point, militarization. When the children are on the territory of the Republic of Belarus, they have meetings with the military units and also with the law enforcement authorities of the Republic of Belarus. They are taught how to use weapons. They are photoed in the military uniform with the propagandistic symbols like the Z letter, which became the symbol of the Russian aggression in Ukraine. And the militarized children, the ones who were on the temporary occupied territories, who entered the cadet military academies, cadet lyceums, so they are used as the propaganda agents to have an impact on the children of their age, and they are engaged in the visits, trips to the Republic of Belarus, and they are taught how to be the patriot of the Russian Federation and how to be the proper citizen of the Russian Federation. And all of these actions have one objective. Even though these children are on the territory of the Republic of Belarus, nevertheless, they are taught how to be the good citizens of the Russian Federation. And also the mobilization reserve of the Russian Federation is formed in this way. And here we come to the conclusion that the Republic of Belarus did not create it from scratch. They just joined the Russian system, which is well spread on both the territory of the Republic of Belarus, on the Russian Federation, and on the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine. In our research, we were able to identify 27 children who at some certain point were in the camps in the Republic of Belarus, and later these children were identified on the territory of the Russian Federation in the camps. So we understand that these children, in fact, they are moving through in circuits for this indoctrination, for this militarization to be at most efficient, to make the perfect citizens of the Russian Federation and the best soldiers who will find Ukraine. Another thing we focused on in obligation, starting with, of course, the heads of the temporary occupied territories who are creating the list of these children and who are sending this list to the territory of the Republic of Belarus, and also Lukashenko himself, who signed the order and his vertical of power on the territory of the Republic of Belarus, because we understand that on all of the territories where these children are, these children are on the territories which are financed by the government. In Belarus, nothing happens without the support of the government. Another thing we paid attention to Onysia Syniuk and his foundation, Onysia Syniuk's foundation, who is the part of the system as the ideologist, and he supports both Putin and Lukashenko. He got an award from Putin for his work with on the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine with the children. But his foundation is both the part of the organization and foundation of these kind of actions. And why would we like to pay attention to these? Because typically, these kind of things are not in the focus of general community. That is the role of the ally country. The ally country is the formation of the Republic of Belarus, joint formation of the Republic of Belarus and the Russian Federation. And they are making closer their system, military, educational, and the rest ones. And the process is always over. The ally country has its own budget and has its own officials. And the budget, there is a certain line. Humanitarian assistance, so-called humanitarian assistance, is directed on financing of the movement of Ukrainian children and their stay on the territory of the Republic of Belarus. And the officials, both in the Republic of Belarus and the Russian Federation, they are signing this budget and allocating the money that are Mizintsev and Mishustin. And we would like to draw attention to these facts because thanks to these people and this structure, there is an opportunity to redirect the money, to allocate the money, and even despite the fact that on some key features, key people were sanctioned. So I think that I will make a pause here for the further evaluation of these actions. Thank you, Onysia. And, well, it was said that, indeed, this line is called humanitarian assistance, and the Republic of Belarus have never refused from the fact that they are helping the children. And can we classify these actions somehow to say that the Republic of Belarus is the part of this process? So the International Criminal Court has proved that they have the division or working on this issue. But we have to consider another thing. What is at the moment in the focus of attention of this organization, and what is considered to be the crime, and what are we insisting on as the authors of these researches? So first of all, we have to understand that we had two initiatives before us, and one of them was from Yale University of Public Health, another one from Latushko team, and both initiatives insisted that the actions of the Russian agents continue the crime of deportation of Ukrainian children to the other territories, not the Russian Federation, but the Republic of Belarus. We have some certain limits, and they were moral, not the technical ones, because we had all the information in our hands, and we could have contacted with the children, with their legal representatives, and we were able to ask for the details on how the consent for deportation was provided. For example, the deportation for the camp, the consent for stay in the camp, because typically these people are on the occupied territories, on the temporary occupied territories, and communication with them means that we are putting them under the risk. And even having the high purposes, we couldn't do that. And also, the work of the Russian agents had another crime on their soul. So speaking of the deportation, very briefly, I will say that in three cases when the children, orphan children, were taken to the territory of the Republic of Belarus, we can say that there was a crime of deportation because Ukraine, as a state, as a patria of these children, have never gave the consent for the so-called humanitarian operation. And the Republic of Belarus had all the opportunities to get this consent. We still have diplomatic relations. They could have sent the note. They could have contacted in the other ways. But the Republic of Belarus does not consider these, recognize these children as Ukrainian citizens, and they consider these children to be the Russian children, and therefore they did not have any kind of objective to get the consent. But speaking of our mandate, it is unique because for the first time we are looking not on physical movement of the children, but we are looking on the fact what is happening with the children in the re-education camps. Typically, these actions can be called political indoctrination and militarization. So we consider that considering the full scale of these actions and discrimination of these children, because Ukrainian children are discriminated because they are children, because they are Ukrainians, and they cannot keep their identity because they come typically from vulnerable categories of the society, because they are from the temporary occupied Ukrainian territories, which the Russian Federation turned into the territories of fear and wrath. And considering all these factors, we consider that to be the crime against humanity. And the discrimination is very difficult to prove because you have to prove that there is a link with the other crimes, the violation of human rights and the military crimes. And what we actually did, because our research, which is available publicly, it is comprehensive to the other two researches, and we have the legal explanation of justification of the crime against humanity. And what I would like to emphasize, what Onysia has already said about the long-term negative consequences for the children and their health, and therefore we can say that there is a crime, the war crime, and the crime against humanity, and also another crime we can name is intentional mental suffering, and also that is a part of the war crime and the crimes against humanity. And considering the objectives the Russian and Belarus agents have, we are talking about their objective to destroy, at least partially, something that is very important for every nation, that are children, to destroy Ukrainian nationality, and that is genocide intention. And even though we are not insisting at the moment that when they are moving the children to the territory of the Republic of Belarus, they are committing genocide crime, but case by case we can make, maybe we will come to these kind of conclusions. We have analyzed the work of the agents of the Russian and the Belarus agents. We applied the international law, and we think that not recognizing these children as Ukrainians is also the crime. And I would like to emphasize that one of the factors to become the part of the Russian camps, both on the territory of Belarus and Russia and on the temporary territories, is to have Russian citizenship. And therefore we kind of we observe very cynic violation of rights of children. And this right is needed to implement the other rights, and through eradication, political indoctrination and militarization, the right of the children for the right for religion, non-discrimination, human being attitude, family surrounding, for education are violated, and others. And we would like to change to refocus from the modern understanding of education as the physical, and we want to say that we have not only physical attacks but also ideological attacks as a part of this process, at least as a part of this process, because when the state occupies, annexes the territories with the purpose of annexing it in the future, I do not think that they just want to turn it into valleys, empty valleys. They want to use the educational institutions to turn the children into the enemies of their own nations. Onysia has mentioned the militarization of the children, and of course we shouldn't underestimate it, because the Russian Federation is preparing the mobilization reserve with our children, and the final point is 2030, and this number is always in the orders of Putin, and the Russian Federation is not going to stop despite all their attempts to show that they are ready for peace negotiations. We also consider it through these facts through international law, and unfortunately we didn't find some things. International humanitarian law is still somewhere behind, and there are only two articles, 50, 51 of the 4th Geneva Convention, and also the 48th article of the evacuation. So we consider it only was one purpose, because the humanitarian justification of moving Ukrainian children to the territory of Belarus is not there. As for the enemy, then there is an interesting aspect that, in fact, if we are talking about, if we look through the lens of the international law, we can say that there is even the threat for evil through the mobilization. Unfortunately, the Rome Statute does not allow us to talk about these opportunities. They are looking for the mate crimes, and we are looking for the support from the other states who are not afraid of the aggressor state, who are not afraid of Belarus too, and maybe there will be someone who will be more creative, and they will make the precedent and will enhance international laws. And here I will stop, and I will pass the floor to Yuri for the further recommendations. Thank you, Katerina. Well, indeed, this report, which we are presenting today, it was already presented on the other platform. I would say in the other countries. It was presented in the US, in Vilnius, in Warsaw, and we know the response of Lukashenko, so-called president of the Republic of Belarus. So he paid a bit of attention to organizations, and he called the presenters and the authors of this research the morons and the liars, and he said that there was no intention to commit a crime in the Republic of Belarus. The only good intention they have to commit good things to Ukrainian children. And he was citing a law that Ukraine didn't give their Ukraine didn't give their children to us, and the Russian Federation helped us, and we took them. But I think that actually this response is not the only objective of this research and the presentation to the broader audience. Mr. Yuri, could you tell us what are the further plans? So what is going to happen with this report, with this information? Good afternoon. My name is Yuri Yurkevich. In fact, this report was presented in the US during our trip. And we had the meeting both in Congress and in Senate, and we had the meetings with a few think tanks, with the Georgetown University and academies, and we did a lot of work to show our new understanding and to express our framework, how not only just to understand that there are crimes against Ukrainian children, but also to give the people who are working on this issue on the professional level, to give the new terminology they can use. And even for Ukrainian media and for our other stakeholders, we have a demand. We are saying that every time you're talking about the movement of Ukrainian children to the Russian Federation or to the Republic of Belarus, please always say about indoctrination and militarization, because that also helps to understand the legal gap about 1,500 children on the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine, because we are shifting the focus from the fact of the children in the other countries to the other crimes. And it is also important in the communications, and it is also important for us seeking the justice. And I think that we will continue working on this issue for the other governments to draw attention to this fact, to pay attention to this fact. In a few issues, I think we can expect for the endorsement from the other countries. And also we know, and yesterday the General Prosecutor of Ukraine, Kostin, said that there is other information from Lithuania about other trans-border crimes with the Republic of Belarus, and therefore this kind of attention we didn't pay enough to the Republic of Belarus. It can return, and not only about the crimes of transfer of Ukrainian children, but also regarding their contribution to the aggression crime, because now we are talking about humanitarian aspects only and about the rights of the children, but the Republic of Belarus participates in equipping and supplying weapons to the Russian Federation, and unfortunately that is also a big contribution. Beside that, we have the plans, and today we are going to meet with the Office of the Prosecutor General, and we will have the meeting with the Ministry of External Affairs of Ukraine, and we have to explain our partners and also intersectoral coalition that we need to return our children, and that are our points. Because we want to tell that these crimes are committed not only by the Russian Federation but also the Republic of Belarus, because they are allies in this crime, and that all of these things have to have the impact on the decision making. And I'm very glad that we have first decision. And Lukashenko is also very nervous. The last 2 weeks we were observing him. We saw 2 or 3 times on TV his response. And that is a moment which can strategically close his participation in the future negotiations, or even the internal reconciliation of the Republic of Belarus. Thank you, Yuri. And indeed, we have not only legal qualification and some documents recorded, I have also recommendations. So Katerina has told the legal recommendations, Mr. Yuri told us about international recommendations, but maybe there are other recommendations, maybe Ukrainian recommendations to their further actions, how they can respond to the facts which were in the report. Very interesting questions. Thank you. I can divide the recommendations in two pieces, so the humanitarian and the legal, when we're talking about the indoctrination and militarization. Speaking of the legal one, in this case, it is very important to, I do not know that the relevant authorities are recording all the actions of the Russian agents when transferring the children and their education. It is conducted in the framework of a few proceedings, but we have to consider the legal changes which are becoming true in Ukraine, also due to the implementation of the Rome Statute, and that will probably cause some certain legal changes in the reconsideration of the strategy of in these situations on the national level. So everything has to be not fragmented, but consistent. So we should not prosecute them for not following the educational, not meeting educational standards. So we should not consider just the deportation, because as we insist, indoctrination and militarization are not the exclusive parts of the deportation. That is a separate crime, the crime against humanity, and partially we have more opportunities in this area, and it's important to respond to these kind of challenges. And when we're talking about restoration justice, restoration of rights of the victims, we have to consider not only the criminal mechanism, but also the more activity in the organization, both in the UN systems and also in the committee, UN Committee on Human Rights and Liquidation of the Consequences. Besides that, we have the decision of the UN Court on the racial discrimination, but nevertheless, in this decision, there is a basis to apply to the International Committee on the violation of the rights of Ukrainian children in the context of indoctrination and militarization. And also there is an important legal gap, which I recently noticed, and it concerns the additional protocol to the Convention on UNESCO against discrimination in education. We're not the part of it, but there is another mechanism to support Ukrainian children against discrimination in education, and therefore, if it is possible to ratify this kind of protocol, I'm sure that it's not going to be a big concern, and it has no kind of threats for our state. I think that we need to do that as fast as possible, and also we have to consider everything through the lens, not only from the children's rights violation, but also the parents' rights violation, to decide on the vector of the education of their children. So here I finish with the educational block, and I will be fast about the humanitarian block, and I'm sure that my colleagues have something to add. And here we have to understand that physical return of the children is not the final point, and that's not the achievement of the objective, the final objective. We have the mental return, when the child will find his or her place in the society, and the child will be reintegrated, and they will get the sufficient level of the services. And here we have to talk about the positive things as well, because the Office of the Ombudsman of Ukraine, just recently we had a meeting and discussed this issue. They are saying that there are great programs of the emergency programs and short, mid, and long-term programs for the children who were affected by deportation and transfer, who were returned from the risk because they were under the risk of deportation. But the issue is that whether we have the physical capacity to implement these programs, because at the same time we need the money and the people, the specialists, the psychologists who know how to work with child's trauma, social workers and case manager. They have to be the profession of the decade in Ukraine. We also need to make the reforms in DI, not to have institution for children, for every child to have a family, because that are the requirements from the Russian Federation. We have so far And we can provide a long list of the recommendation, but it's not the end. So I will add in the context of the task, so we have in the context of returning the children and the mental return, because when we're talking about the evaluation, whether we have enough resources, we have to, first of all, understand our own needs in these resources. How many children did we return? And we have to record who are these children, what kind of needs do they have, where do they come from, have they been on the temporary occupied territories, and we are talking about indoctrination and militarization there, or maybe they was deported to the territory of the Russian Federation or the Republic of Belarus. It had different needs, and that can be different auxiliary crimes, and there should be special individual approach to each child. And we have the positive things about this issue, that there is the system of recording of these crimes of register is being prepared to identify the needs of these children. And I think that it's important to say that in the context of all these things we mentioned on the international level, about the advocacy, about the cooperation with the other states, in the context of the returning of the children and the informing of the other states, in all of these cases we have to see the important role of Ukraine, and both in coalition of the return of Ukrainian children as it is now, and also the work on its expansion, because at the moment there is a club of Western states, and that's not beneficial for Ukraine when it comes to the return of these children and the possibility of communication through the mediator with the Russian Federation. We need the states which are able to be our advocacy agents in the Southern America, in Asia, in African countries, because when we are talking ourselves with these countries about our problems, the perception will be different from the agents talking from the agents acting on these territories, who are talking about the returning these children back. And beside that, we have to make the further research and details on the crimes committed against Ukrainian children, because we're focused on the transfer, on the consequences, and the terms and conditions, how it happened. And now we want to talk about militarization and indoctrination, because it was said that there are 1.5 million of children on the Russian territory. They might not be transferred, but they were the part of this system. They were affected, and there should be a certain approach to these children to understand how to return them mentally. We have to understand what kind of system affected them on the temporary occupied territories, on the territory of the Russian Federation, and in the Republic of Belarus. In fact, there were lots of recommendations, and some of them are being repeated since 2022, when the first facts when the massive facts of deportation were recorded, and we're talking about rehabilitation, reintegration, and the more the indoctrination lasted, the harder it will be to return them. And in the system, and we do not have this system, and that of course makes us upset. And we are talking about the shift of the focus, because we start to study what happens with the children during the indoctrination, during the time when staying in the state which we still did not consider the aggressor state. But there is a question, can we say that deportation is ongoing, or should we make a full stop and we should not say that there is no deportation, and let's look in the other direction? Let me start, and I'm sure that my colleagues will be able to add. We are not able to say that deportation crime is not committed anymore. Our request for the focus shift is not just to forget and not to leave deportation alone, but we have to include here all the additional crimes, and to understand indoctrination and militarization not only in the framework of deportation but independently from these crimes, because once again we're returning to the situation on the temporary occupied territories. And here we need more understanding that when these territories, when the Russian Federation included these territories to their state, the legal framework was used there, but also educational system, social system, medical system, and so on. These territories, in the Russian understanding, in the Russian and Belarus first understanding, perception, is the part of the Russian Federation, and all the systems which exist in the Russian Federation, they exist on the temporary occupied territory. The children brought up on the temporary occupied territory, so they get the Russian citizenship after they were deported to the territory of the Russian Federation. And therefore, we cannot be talking independently about these two things, deportation and indoctrination and militarization. But we lacked attention to militarization and indoctrination. And therefore, we have to shift the focus, because we lose attention to the children who are on the temporary occupied territories and they are not transferred, but they are in the same system. Very briefly to what was said, whether deportation is ongoing on the temporary occupied territories of Ukraine, because it is important, also because of the actions of the coalitions. In fact, there is nothing on the deportation of the children from or the forced transferring. So we have to understand that there are children who were transferred, deported, and there is 1,600,000 children who are constantly under the threat of deportation. And it's important to emphasize that some of these children are under a bigger risk. There are three categories of children. The first one, that are the orphans and without parents. Unfortunately, the process of both depriving from the parents' right and turning children into orphans, it's hard to stop. And as Onysia has said, the Russian Federation decided that they have the right to decide where they can send these children to, whether to the orphanages on the temporary occupied territories or to transferring them to the Russian Federation, or, for example, to send them to the Russian families. So, no, red alert. Great. So, speaking of this group, in 2023, in November, when we had the International Day of Foster Children, the so-called commissioner of so-called republic said, Shveika, she said that 13 children from Luhansk Oblast were sent to the Russian families for adopting. And therefore, this process is ongoing, and also there are educational terms. So what we were focused on as well, and in these questions, I would like to emphasize that it is not said anywhere that the criminal has to act with the intention to keep these children under his or her consent control. So the crime was committed when the children crossed the border, and that was made without consent, and that was a forced transfer. And at the same time, there is a group of children who are transferred after so-called meeting. So when the representatives of the Russian universities are coming, or the law enforcement representatives, for example, the investigator, they are choosing the children and they are taken to their lyceums, academies, and colleges. And for example, Kazan University has launched the forum for the Ukrainian children. So these children are studying there, and they are starting in this class, and then they were entering the Kazan University. So in this case, we're not talking about returning these children, and the Russian Federation is interested in that, and deportation is ongoing. And of course, nobody can compare them to the forced deportation after the full-scale war, when even according to the Russians, around 800,000 children crossed the border. Yes, we are not saying that all of them were forced, were deported, but considering the facts, we can say that dozens of hundreds suffered from this. But the processes are ongoing, and we should not forget about it, and we should save the children. And it's important for the children under the risk of deportation to be taken away from the occupied territories. Thank you very much for this answer. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, so if there are no questions, in this case, I think that we can finish our meeting. Thank you very much. I would like to thank our speakers and presenters, and I would like to think that the presentation of the research was made by Onysia Syniuk, legal analyst of the ZMINA Center for Human Rights, Katerina Rashevska, lawyer of the Regional Center for Human Rights, and Yuri Yurkevich, program director of Freedom House Ukraine, and me, Alona